Okay, so hey guys, I don't really know how to start one of these things because I've never done it before, but I guess I should just introduce myself. My name's Tiffany. For those that don't know me or have stumbled upon this video based on the title, I am a hairstylist in the Northern Kentucky area, and I'm making this video basically to talk about my, I want to say experience, but mostly what I went through, my journey. I don't know how to explain it, but about 2 months ago, I had committed suicide or attempted to commit suicide by overdosing. And that's so weird to say because I never thought I'd be in that position where my life got to that point where that was an option, or I ever thought that was going to be an option. But it happened. And I'm basically just kind of sitting here and telling you my experience and kind of letting people know that if you're going through the same thing or if you've gone through the same thing, you're not alone, because I thought for a while that I was the only one going through what I was going through because I didn't realize what I was going through. And I never really put an importance on it because I always thought like, oh, I'll pass, it'll pass. And I always thought it was gonna go away because, you know, if you don't think about it, out of sight, out of mind, but that doesn't really work with anxiety and depression. The more you put it down and the more that you don't recognize it, the worse it gets, or at least in my case, that's what happened. I guess I should kind of talk about the events that led up to it. This past year, I've been going through a journey of weight loss and trying to get my health back on track, physically. And I say physically because that's literally what I was focused on. And I kind of let my mental health take a back seat to my physical health because, you know, if I look a certain way, if I look better, then obviously that means my mental health is gonna be better, obviously. At least that's what I thought, which wasn't the case. I lost, now it's a total of 30 pounds over the span of a year, I think. 9, 10, I'm not really sure. But right now I'm sitting at a weight loss of about 30 pounds, which is a lot. And I always, like I said, thought that, you know, if I lose all this weight, I'm gonna be happy and that my life is gonna be great. And then I'm gonna look skinny and like, you know, everything's gonna fall into place, which isn't the case, obviously. You have to, you know, mind, body, spirit, you have to make sure all of those things are intact and good and well. And, you know, I didn't. I put a very strong importance on my outer appearance, and I think I always have, even when I was 30 pounds heavier. Obviously, I'm a makeup artist slash hairstylist, so of course, outer beauty, you know, that's the first thing people see, the first thing you focus on. That's the first thing I think about when I wake up to go to work in the morning, is that I gotta have my makeup on. I have to, you know, look my best. And I think that's also what kind of contributed to it. I was so focused on looking the best outside, but I never really focused on the inside. Sorry. And I let those things that bothered me on the inside kind of fester and fester and keep festering until it was a bigger issue. And about a couple months ago, I started developing really severe panic attacks. Never experienced that before. It's probably one of the scariest things I've ever had to experience, being that I never experienced panic attacks before. It was, at first I didn't know what it was because I just thought like, oh, obviously something had to have happened that I'm panicking right now, but nothing happened. I could literally be sitting down on my bed, you know, scrolling through my phone, and all of a sudden I can't breathe, my heart's racing, and I feel like I'm gonna throw up, and that's what happened. And that happened multiple times, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know, you know, what this was because I never experienced before. I've experienced anxiety. I've always had anxiety from being very little. And I always feel like I've had a small, you know, thing with depression when I was little as well. You know, I deal with social anxiety all the time. And most people that, you know, that know me know that that's what I deal with because I'm mostly a quiet person. It's gotten better. But when I was really little, it was really bad. I don't know where I was going with that, but back to the panic attacks. I dealt with really bad panic attacks both at work and at home. At work, it kind of was scary because you can't really explain panic attacks to people because you can't explain it yourself. So, you know, if I can't explain it to myself, how am I supposed to explain it to somebody? It's just gonna sound ridiculous. And I remember that Saturday before I had tried to commit suicide, it was the worst, probably the worst day that I've ever had at work. I'm a very sensitive person. I let things get to me 100%. You know, if I feel like someone's tone of voice changed with me, I take that to heart. Or if I feel like someone's not talking to me one day, I take that to heart. I take a lot of things to heart. And I think, you know, that's a good thing and a bad thing. And I let it get to a bad place that, you know, I let customers and, you know, this whole retail thing, because I work in retail as well, that I let someone else's, you know, emotions affect mine, and it got to the point where I was bawling in the back room. And I hate saying that because I hate that I let it get to that point, but I think everything kind of added up to the point where, like, it was just, you know, I couldn't hide it anymore. I couldn't hide the fact that I was sad. I couldn't hide the fact that I was dealing with this, and, you know, I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't lie to myself. I couldn't lie to someone else, be like, yeah, I'm fine, you know. When someone sits in your chair, I'm all over the place, so I apologize, but being a hairstylist, when someone sits in your chair and someone asks, like, oh, how are you? You don't say, oh, I have this going on, I have this going on, I have this going on, you know, on top of this, blah, blah, blah. You just say, you know, I'm fine, I'm good, how are you? And you move on with the conversation. You don't tell people what's wrong, because who wants to hear about, you know, your anxiety, your depression, you know, what's going on with your life, all this stuff. You don't tell people that. It's like, you know, when you post on Instagram, you don't post the bad stuff. No one does. No one shows you the bad parts of your life. It's like a highlight reel. Everyone shows you the good things that happened. No one tells you the bad things that happened, because who wants to read about that? And I always felt like, and I've told this to multiple people, I always felt like a burden to people when I told people my issues, because I didn't want to bring someone else down. Even if they ask what's wrong, I don't want to put that on them. I never want to put that on them, and I still deal with that today. I never want to make someone else feel bad because of my problems. Even going to a therapist, I feel bad afterwards because I just told her all this stuff, and now she has to take that, you know, she has to put that on herself. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but to me it makes sense. And if you hear people upstairs, I'm currently in a hotel, and I can't control that. But I'm all over the place, so if you're tracking along, like, great, but I have no, like, hold on, let's rewind. Okay, so panic attacks, dealt with that, and little did I know that that November, December were going to be my version of hell, and I explained it to everybody. It's been one of the worst 2 months of my life, kind of starting with the fact that I tried to commit suicide by taking narcotics. And like I said, I never thought that I'd get to that point where I thought that was my only option. Because I always heard about it in high school. I always thought, like, you know, it was very prevalent because a lot of my fellow students, some of them had committed suicide. And yes, it was sad, but it was never, like, I didn't know them personally, so I never connected with it. You know, I always thought, like, in my head, like, oh, that's never gonna be me. I don't know how someone gets to that point. Like, I always, you know, ran that in my brain. Because, you know, I always thought, like, how can someone's life get so bad that that's what they choose? But you never realize how bad it gets until you're in that position. And most people that don't deal with anxiety or depression or, you know, social anxiety and all that stuff, they don't understand. They're not supposed to understand because they're not going through it. And you can't be mad at them for not understanding because they're not going through it. It's a very weird thing to go through. It's very complicated to talk about. It's very, you know, confusing to kind of explain to somebody, like, oh, how do you have anxiety or blah, blah, blah. And I think it's very confusing for people that I was around to understand, you know, why did I commit suicide? My life seems so perfect. I live with my parents. I have great parents. I have a great family. You know, my parents pay my bills. I don't have bills. my life looked great. It looked like I had it all together, and, I thought I had it all together. I thought, like, wow, my life's great. Or I thought I looked like my life's great, and, I kind of lied to myself all the time that, yeah, my outside life looked great, but inside I felt lost. I felt empty. And that's the only way I can explain it. I was so, and this is how I explain it to people a lot of the times, I was so overly emotional because I didn't have any of those emotions. I couldn't keep that inside, so I just constantly crying, sad, mad, angry, happy. I cried all the time, and people that I live with can attest to that, cried all the time. It was just overly emotional. And I couldn't really explain to you the day that I committed suicide because it's really all a blur. I mean, I can tell you everything that happened, but I couldn't really tell you, what was going through my head, because there was nothing going through my head. I thought it was the only option. This is, like, I just didn't want to feel anything anymore because I felt it so bad. I felt everything to the point where it was just, I just wanted it to be over with. I felt so much that I needed it to be over. And I remember that day, I remember grabbing 3 water bottles. I remember letting my dogs out, bawling my eyes out because I thought that was gonna be the last time I see them. And I remember passing my brother because he was going downstairs to his room, and I was like, he didn't notice me having these water bottles, didn't ask me, like, why do I have 3 water bottles? And I don't blame him for not asking because why would someone ask? But that's kind of my thought process. And I remember knowing that because my mom has a lot of medication, that obviously she was going to have, some sort of medication that's gonna kill me. I thought for sure that I could find something. And I remember, and I still have the searches in my phone, what medicine kills you fastest. And it kills me that I even thought to search that. But I did, and none of the medicine, I couldn't find any of the medicine that was on the list in my mom's medicine cabinet or medicine drawer. But I found a medicine that sounded like it was gonna kill me. So I took that whole bottle, it was completely full, and I went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the ground by the bathtub, and I bawled my eyes out. Bawled and, sorry. And, there's so many people walking doors. And I remember, where was I going with that? I remember sitting on the ground. I had headphones in, I was listening to music. Couldn't tell you what music. And I began to take pills. And it was so full to the point where I don't take pills well. I gag all the time. Not that no one really needed to know that. So, miss trying to keep them down and chugging water at the same time and feeling dizzy because that's what happens. You start to feel dizzy, and I remember starting to feel something inside. And I got scared. I really did. And, most people that have gone through this experience, the moment that you take the last pill, immediate regret fills your body. Immediate regret. And while I was taking those pills, I was texting a friend of mine saying that I took pills, and I was texting my sister-in-law, and this is the part that kills me. I told her, I said, tell my nieces and nephews I love them, but I can't do it anymore. And that makes me so sad that I thought that, that I wouldn't be here to see my nephew grow up. I wouldn't be here to see those monumental things in his life about him, saying my name for the first time or giggling or seeing my other nieces and nephews growing up. And it kills me that if had it gone any different way, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have been able to see that. And I wouldn't be able to see those future moments. But you don't think about that when you're going through that. You don't. You really don't. But immediately after I'd taken those pills, immediate regret filled my body. So I called my dad, and he was at work. And of course I was bawling hysterically my eyes out. And I said, I took pills, I can't do this anymore, and missed crying. And obviously he wasn't, hearing me because I wasn't making a coherent sentence. And eventually he got out what I was trying to say, and he, trying to be as stable and calm as possible, which I'm not sure how he was. But he was just telling me to stay on the phone, and I didn't know why, and all this stuff. And, as I was on the phone with him, trying to make sure I was still coherent, because at any point I could have passed out. My brother came upstairs, and he had me unlock the door, and he sat there with me. And of course, a lot of things, I'm kind of giving you the short story, but because the ambulance and police were called, the paramedics and everything kind of started showing up, and they started asking me questions like, why did you do this? And I can't tell you the amount of times someone asked me, why did I do this? And I couldn't tell them why, because I didn't know why or how, or, I couldn't tell someone that. And I was just so drained that day. I missed feeling dizzy because of the medicine and all that stuff. I was so drained, and I was just like, it wasn't me. From what I can remember, I just was not myself. And of course, I had to get changed because I was in my pajamas at the time, and they escorted me out of my house and into the ambulance, and they, strapped me in and took me to the hospital. And, I remember in that car ride, that ambulance ride, I was just kept thinking to myself, how did I get to this point? What led me in my life that I'm now in the back of an ambulance because I tried to commit suicide? And a lot of things were running in my head, like, oh, are they gonna put my stomach? Like, I didn't know what was going on. So I got to the hospital, and of course my parents met with me, and I was bawling my eyes out, of course, still bawling my eyes out. And I remember my dad saying, we thought you were doing so well. Like, we thought you were doing so well, because I had mentioned I was doing so well physically. But I wasn't. I wasn't at all. And that happened multiple times. Multiple people asked me, we thought you were doing so well. And I thought I was doing so well, but I wasn't at all. And I remember seeing my best friend. I want to say she was like 10 months pregnant, 9 months, almost 10 months pregnant. I know she was overdue, I think, yeah. And I remember bawling my eyes out when I saw her, because just the idea that I wouldn't be able to meet her baby, my niece, made me so emotional, to the point where I was just bawling my eyes out. And she sat with me, and my parents sat with me, and it was just, again, how did I get to this point? And I'm a big, strong believer, and still to this day, even with going through all this stuff, that everything happens for a reason. Whether we know that reason in the moment, or we know that reason years or months from now, I feel like everything always happens for a reason. God doesn't put things in your life just because. He doesn't put people in your life just because. Everyone comes into your life and goes for a reason, and everything happens for a reason. And that's so cheesy, but it's true. It's so true. You may not see it now, but when you're older, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, this happened because this happened, or this happened because it's grown me into the person that I am. And I'm all over the place, so I apologize again. But I wanted to make this video and get it out as soon as possible, because, I not only want to help somebody, if, it only reaches one person, that's my only goal. I don't do this for sympathy. I don't, talk about it for sympathy. I don't need sympathy. It's just to help someone that's going through a position that I was in, or is going to go through, and see this and see that, you can get through it. You can, get on the other side. As hard as it is to see that, you can see that that happens, and it will happen. You just have to be there to see it happen, because if you're not here, you're not going to see the good things in life. And one thing I always constantly try to remind myself, and still to this day, just because bad things happen in your life doesn't make it a bad life. And I always got into that position where, like, I always thought like, woe is me, bad things happen, I'm a bad person, this and this and this, and my life is terrible and blah, blah, blah. But you can't get into that mindset, because that just ultimately leads to destruction and just, you know, leads you back into the position that I was in, because I kind of always got into that mindset of, you know, bad things happen, I'm a bad person, blah, 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 and that's just kind of the whole thing. And back to the whole hospital thing, I was sitting there and they told me that I'd have to go to a psych ward, or treatment as they called it. And I immediately, like, when I just said it was a psych ward, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, it's a psych ward, I'm gonna be in this isolation chamber and all this stuff, and everything was going through my head, because I didn't know, I've never been in that position, I didn't know what it was, and I was terrified, because like I said, I live with my parents, even though I have a almost full-time job, and I'm, you know, I have an adult job and all this stuff, and I'm an adult. It'd be the first time that I'm away from my parents without me knowing, or me choosing to be away from my parents. And it was terrifying, because I'm very much a homebody, and I'll tell this to anybody, if I'm, you know, away from my home, I want to go back home. This is also what kind of caused me all this stuff, because I'm always isolating myself in my bedroom. And that only made my depression, anxiety worse. And I was on, hold on, rewind. They told me that I'm gonna be transferred to a psych ward. It's policy. They put you on a suicide watch for 72 hours, and I, at the time, had no idea what it was gonna entail. So we sat there for a while, and we didn't get a bed until 6 a.m., and my dad sat there with me, and I cannot tell you, it's gonna make me cry. My dad is 100% the most selfless, holy crap, I didn't think I was gonna cry. The most selfless man I've ever met. I've never met someone so, see, I wasn't expecting to do this, and then it happened, and then, like I said, if you've ever met my dad, which, if you're a family friend, you probably have, he's the most kind, selfless person I've ever met. 100% tenfold, and I don't know what I did to deserve the fact that, you know, he puts all of his kids and his grandchildren and everybody in front of himself, and, you know, he was there for me when I thought that no one was going to be there for me. I thought no one cared, and he sat there with me, and he's just, I mean, ultimately, he's my best friend. Like, I can't even explain how much I appreciate him, and he never gets enough credit, and I need to stop crying because this is not what I wanted to do. But, you know, we sat there, and it was just one of, like, the longest 12 hours ever. We got there at, like, lunchtime, and we didn't get out until 6 a.m. And I remember my dad having to go to work and me bawling my eyes out because I had to go to this place I was just not familiar with, and I was just scared. And I remember I lost my clothes, or the hospital lost my clothes, so I was in this blue scrub. I didn't have anything, anything under it. It was just blue scrubs, and I just felt so gross. I just wanted to take a shower, and I just wanted to feel human again, because at the time I didn't feel like I was in a hospital, and I didn't feel, myself. And I remember sitting there when they have to transport you, and I was strapped into another one of those things, and it was the start of not being, my own person for 72 hours, because you're constantly being watched, and you're constantly, everything's really taken away from you, because, obviously you don't want to hurt yourself. They don't want you to hurt yourself. So everything's kind of taken away from you, your phone, and which I have never been away from my phone for that long. It's sad to say, but I'm constantly on my phone. So that was kind of, a detox that I needed as well. And I remember sitting there when they transported me, and I was in intake forever, and I remember, just sitting there bawling my eyes out and falling asleep at the same time, and just again wondering, how did I get to this position in my life? Why am I here? Obviously I knew why I was there, because I committed suicide, but how did my life get so bad that this is what I'm, this is my only option? And the first day that you're there in a psych ward or treatment, you know, I got in there and it didn't look like a psych ward or, you know, anything that I thought of, because in movies they make it seem so different. But it honestly just kind of looked like a center, like a doctor's office almost, just with a bunch of like rooms and stuff. And I remember, again, bawling my eyes out because I didn't have any of my stuff. My dad hadn't brought it yet. I just felt so empty and alone, and I just didn't want to be there. To be completely honest, the first day I just refused to do anything. I sat in my room and I, you know, slept the whole day, and the only time I woke up is if they were taking my vitals or asking me questions, or doctors would come in and, you know, check my vitals, like I said, and ask me questions and making sure I'm doing okay. And I didn't eat breakfast that day. I didn't eat lunch. I refused to, you know, I didn't refuse. I just didn't want to accept the fact that I was there. Later that day, they kind of, not forced, but they needed to make sure I was eating. So they forced me to go to dinner. But I bawled my eyes out because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to accept the fact that I was here. And where you eat dinner, it's like a lunchroom, and I was like, I felt just like I was not my own person, and someone was forcing me to do stuff, and it just felt like everything was stripped away from me and all this stuff. And it was just so, like, I was so miserable that first day. And I remember after lunch, it was, you know, your parents or family could visit you. And when I saw my dad walk through that door, I bawled my eyes out. And I just, you know, I couldn't run to him fast enough. And I, you know, hugged him and I cried, and I hugged him and I cried. And it was just this, like, I couldn't explain to you the moment that happened. I was like, I finally see a familiar face, and I finally felt kind of okay. And I just remember sitting there with my dad and talking to him, and just again telling him, like, I just want to get out of here. Like, this is, you know, just this is not gonna help. Excuse me, this is not gonna help me. This is, you know, blah blah blah. And, like, you know, I had to be there. Like, this is where I was meant to, you know, this is what I was meant to, you know, go through, and I have to go through this, and, you know, to be able to be on the other side and, you know, be okay. And, you know, I didn't really think about that at the time. I just felt like I just wanted to get out of there. And I remember him leaving and me pulling my eyes out again. And it was just so miserable. But I just knew after he left, and you know, when I was getting a shower that day, and I just didn't have any of my normal stuff. I just felt so gross. You don't have normal stuff because you can't have strings, you can't have, you know, certain things, you can't have razors, you can't have anything because they don't want you to hurt yourself. You know, they give you this big old long list of things you can't bring in. It just felt like none of the stuff that I was normally using I could bring in, and it just felt so just out of my element. But anyways, I remember taking a shower and then going to bed that night, and just again crying and realizing, and I realized to myself, like, I have to get through tomorrow. I have to do, and, you know, do whatever they tell me to do. I have to, you know, sit in group therapy. I have to do these things in order to move on with the rest of my life. Because if I just sit here and not do anything, it's not gonna help me. I have to accept that help. As much as I didn't want to be a burden, like I said, I had to accept that help. I have to get help. You know, I just needed that help. And I remember waking up and I was like, you know, feeling good, and I got breakfast, and I went to group therapy, and I actually talked in group therapy, which was surprising, and it helped me. And I hadn't been in therapy for years before that, just because I just refused to go to therapy, and just realizing, like, I have to talk through those things. Like, I can't get through it if I don't talk about it. You know, we're not meant to go through life by ourselves. And, you know, as much as you don't want to put things on other people, you have to ask for help. You have to tell people your problems. You have to make sure you're not going through this life together, because, I mean, through life alone, because life is meant to be lived together. That's why we have families. That's why we have, you know, friends. It's, you know, they're here to hear you. They want to help you as much as you don't think they do. They want to be there for you. And as much as your anxiety tells you, like, oh, you don't want to be a burden, you don't want to be, you know, your anxiety tells you they don't want to listen or they don't care, but in reality, they care so much. they'd rather see you get help and give you that help and have you talk versus seeing you at your funeral. And my friend had told me that in perspective, and it just kind of put everything in perspective. And it's like, that is true. They'd rather, talk through your problems versus, it being too late and seeing you at your funeral and they can't talk to you because you're dead. They can't talk to you about your problems because you're dead. That's where it ends. And it's, my friend telling me that just made me bawl my eyes out, because it's like, I thought like, it got to the point where just no one cared, but in reality, they care so much. And I can't stress that enough to anybody that needs to hear this. Your fans, your family and your friends care so much more than you think they do. Your anxiety is telling you that they don't, but they do. And I hope that whoever is listening or whoever's watching, that resonates with you and that they do care. And, you have to get help. Again, you can't do life alone. And like I said, life is meant to be lived together. And I can't stress this enough. Again, and I say this multiple times, ask for help. People are there for a reason. Therapy is there for a reason. Your family's there for a reason. They want to help you. And back to the whole treatment or whatever. And that first day, there wasn't any visitation, so I didn't see anybody that I really knew. I had to, talk to people. I had to, accept this is where I am, and I have to, make the best of it. And I did as best as possible. It was hard, but I did it. And I remember again, there's no clock, so it felt like the longest day. I couldn't check my phone to see what the time was, so I never really knew what the time was. And getting to know a bunch of these people that were in treatment, it was so strange because they were all in good spirits almost. And I remember one girl playing the guitar, and that throwing me off because I'm like, why are people, why are they finding happiness at this point right now? Like, I'm miserable, but they're so happy. And, a lot of these people are just making the best of the situation. People that have put themselves there, offered to go and get help. And one thing I learned in treatment is that, yes, we ask for help, but the strongest people ask for help. And that it's something to look up to, that you did ask for help, and that, you recognized you need help. And, I remember sharing my story and how I was a hairstylist and all this stuff, and just no one knew who I was. So it was kind of like this refreshing thing that no one assumed anything, except, one of my friends from hair school had been there, and it was so strange seeing someone that I knew, and, I was getting to talk to her and hearing her story, and it was good to catch up and all this stuff. And it was, it made me realize that this happens to a lot of people. It's not just me. It's not just, you. It's people deal with anxiety and depression day in and day out, and things that are worse than anxiety and depression, and you're not alone. And it really, really put that, hit that home for me, is that I'm not alone in this situation. Everyone's going through something. And just because, I have these bad things happening to me and all this stuff doesn't mean a bad life. And I can't stress it enough. Again, just because bad things happen to you doesn't mean, you have a bad life. And I always thought that. And again, I'm sidetracked so bad, but back to the whole treatment thing. It reached the third day, and I was counting down the hours until my, hold was up. And I remember feeling good because I was put on medicine. I can't even speak. I was put on medicine that I needed to be put on. And that was another thing I felt, weird about, because I had just gotten off of medicine because it was making me gain weight, and I already lost all this weight, and I was so scared to gain weight back. But they put me on medicine that, never caused bad side effects or, weight gain and all that stuff. And I realized how important that medicine was, to kind of stabilize my mood and all this stuff, and realizing that I got so far off the beaten path that I couldn't control myself, and that this medicine needs to help me. And it's okay to take medicine for it. It's okay. You're not it's not a bad thing. And I have to constantly remind myself, like, yes, I have to take medicine in the morning all the time. I have to make sure I take it. And it's hard when you go from not taking medicine to taking medicine every day, and it's hard to accept that. And I couldn't tell you why. It's just medicine, but it just, in my head, I always contributed medicine with, not being a burden, but that you need help and all this stuff. And again, back to the whole, I didn't think I needed help, but I did. And now I'm, after that all happened, I got out and all this stuff, and I was just so happy to get out. And again, I'm giving you this shortened version. There's more to the story, but this is kind of like the main points. And I remember being so happy to get out and running to my parents' car. I didn't have any shoes on because I didn't have any shoes, and just feeling so grateful and, re-energized. And, I needed to go through that. I needed to go to treatment. I needed to be by myself, not isolated, but, in a different thing that I wasn't used to, and I needed to do it. I needed to. As much as at the time I thought like, oh, this is useless, I needed to go through it. I needed to get help. But little did I know after treatment that December was going to be, again, hell on earth. My grandpa was in the hospital, completely, threw us all for a loop because we didn't think anything was wrong. And I'm not going to give you the full story because it's going to make me cry. But long story short, he had lost his leg because there wasn't circulation in it, and they found cancer, which threw us again for a loop because we didn't think anything was wrong. And because 6 months ago, I guess his scans were clear and no one really thought anything of it. He was going in for a routine checkup, and this all happened, and no one really, no one could put two and two together and why this was happening. And I just remember, not seeing him in the hospital because I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I couldn't go back in that mindset, and I still feel guilty for it, but I can't put that on myself, because my grandpa wouldn't have wanted me to see him like that. And, he got cancer, lung cancer and some other cancer, and it got so bad to the point where it's just none of the treatment was working. So he was put on hospice, and it was just all happened in a few weeks, and then he passed away. And when I say everything happens for a reason, I had to go through treatment so I could get through December. Because I think had I not gone through treatment, I wouldn't have been able to go through the December the way that it had, planned out. And it's been, hard. It's been hard to, wake up every day and be like chipper and, happy. And Christmas Eve was hard because we always went over to my grandpa's house, and we weren't doing that anymore. And it was just difficult. It's hard losing somebody. It really is. And we hadn't lost a family member in a while. And I'm not saying if you constantly lose it, it's easy, but it's not easy by any means. But it was just threw us all for a loop because it happened so fast. So fast. And it's just crazy what happens, when life happens. It's just crazy. And again, with the whole, just because bad things happen doesn't mean it's a bad life. And I constantly, through December, had to, go over that in my head. Like, yes, life sucks right now. It really does. But it doesn't mean the rest of my life is going to be bad. Though it's going to be hard to get through, these, years now without my grandpa, and going through that and not seeing him on Christmas Eve and not seeing him on birthdays. It's going to be very, very difficult. But with therapy and all this stuff, which I'm starting therapy in February, hopefully, that I can work through some of these issues and be able to, be truly happy. Because for a while I wasn't, and, I'm still getting to that point, and every day is just, I have to take it day by day, because I was just living for the next day. I was like, oh, if I can get through this day, I can make it to the next day. But you have to live in the moment, and I was never truly living in the moment because I was just trying to get through the day. And you can't do that. You have to experience what's going on right now in this hour and this minute. You have to experience that right now. You can't think about what's going to happen, an hour from now. You can't think about that, and it's hard. That's part of my anxiety. I constantly worry, and I constantly think like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen if this happens? Or if I do this, what's going to happen after that? I can't think like that. You can't let yourself get to that point where you think like that. because it's difficult. I can sit here and tell you that it's difficult, 100%. It's hard, but it is possible. And I hope that me saying this and me talking about my experience with, you know, me trying to commit suicide or attempting to commit suicide, and, you know, these things that I explained in the video, if you've stayed for however long this video is going to be, or if you're seeing this, because I'm not sure if I'm even going to be able to edit it and post it and whatnot, but I hope that some of the things resonated with you, whether you're going through it or if you experienced it or having a loved one go through it. My only hope is that it reaches one person, and like I said, it's not for sympathy. I'm not sitting here talking about my story so that someone feels bad for me, because trust me, I felt bad for myself for a long time, and I don't want someone else to feel bad. But that's what happened, and this is my story, and, you know, this is part of life, and I live to tell the story. That's my, you know, takeaway from this, is that, you know, I went through attempting suicide and I made it out on the other end, and it's every day is another journey. It's just because I went through therapy or I went through treatment and I have medicine, everything, you think everything is rainbows and butterflies, but it's not. You're still working every day to be the best version of yourself, and it's hard. It's hard getting up in the morning when you know that you have to constantly work at it. It's not you know, just because I went through therapy that I'm, you know, life is great now. It's just how you change your perspective and all this stuff, and it's just crazy that I'm here in Florida because I thought that, oh, I'm not gonna make it to this vacation because I don't want to be here, and, you know, it's just crazy. Again, that's how I can explain it. It's crazy. But like I said, if you take one thing from this video, it's that, you know, you're not a burden. It's okay to ask for help. And just because you go through bad things doesn't mean it's a bad life. And again, I just hope it reaches somebody. Because I know I made a post on Instagram and I got messages from people saying it helped them or it resonated with them. And I just know that it's so prevalent in this society that I hope that it reaches somebody. And I hope that someone can take something away from it. And I just want to thank you for listening to me ramble and me bawling my eyes out and me crying. And I hope this helps. Thank you for listening.